Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Chairperson Walker, the only one I heard was from Ms. Escobar, who says she cannot make it. The rest I expect to be.
Good morning, all.
Morning. Oh, that might be someone's YouTube that's streaming in the background. Make sure any YouTube is, oh wait, it's probably me. Okay, it was me.
Yeah, I apologize. My computer is dropping out of Zoom.
If it keeps happening, you may want to get off of camera after a while because that helps strengthen the signal.
Okay.
Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, I think everyone may be here. Give me just 1 minute to relaunch the my board docs again.
While you're here, we do have Miss Oliver on the phone. Ms. Escobar said she could not attend today. I'm waiting to hear from Dr. Schmerling.
Okay. I guess Ms. Santiago, is Dr. Schmerling the only person we're waiting on?
Correct. Although we do have board members who join anyway that are not, but officially part of the committee, Dr. Schmerling. I am sending him a message now.
Okay. Okay. Reports. Let me do one thing here. Okay, Christina, as I'm trying to launch, look at my notes. I see the board docs. Uh, Typically, there's like an agenda summary. I didn't see one. It may not be essential. Was that included in what was sent? I'm looking at board docs for a,
You are in the finance committee agenda?
yeah.
Would you like me to screen share?
A minute.
Okay.
I am,
On
okay,
the left, you see the items for the
Yep.
meeting, and then on the right, you should, if you scroll down, you should see the summary for the item and attachments as well.
Give me just 1 second. Okay, let me see if I can do that. Okay. Yep, I see all that. One thing I'm not seeing is who the presenter is for each of the items.
Yep. So once the meeting starts, when you could turn it over to Chief Penn, and then he will tag in each person, or I will tag in each person per.
I was thinking that was the case, but yeah, I didn't want to assume that. One Chief Penn, so you're getting the handoff then. All right, I think then we're ready to proceed because the board docs is open and we'll get started. Have we started the live recording yet?
Yes.
Well, then. Good morning. This is Tyrone Walker, and welcome to the Finance and Audit Committee meeting for the Hartford Board of Education. Pardon the slight delay in our starting, and I am welcoming you to these proceedings. I don't know if we need to do any kind of around the table. I think we're all familiar with each other, and in which case I'm going to hand the agenda over to Chief Penn to move through our regular meeting items.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Our first item on the agenda is a proposal to extend the contract with Education Resource Strategies, ERS. They've been our consulting partner on a number of different issues over the past several years. And in particular, some of the work around our ESSER spending, strategic plan, and what's proposed is an extension of some of those activities and a focus on how to accelerate some of the investments. One of the things you're going to hear with me a little later today is that our spending in the COVID-related grants continues to lag where it should be. And so we're trying to reposition some of those work streams in a way that accelerates that work going forward. With that as intro, let me turn it over to the superintendent, who I know wants to add some color on this issue. And I would also note that we have Jess O'Connor from ERS is with us here today as well.
Thank you, Chief Penn. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, let me just give you a brief background context. So we did start working with ERS when we first were engaging our entire community around the redesign of Hartford Public Schools. And then most recently, the work has focused on the short-term planning and design, including the development of the ESSER and ARP budget, specifically to align it to our priorities. If you remember, what we did not want to do with the recovery funds was this separate list of actions, activities. We really wanted to align the resource allocation to our strategies, our 4 priorities. And so they've supported us with that, also tracking our continuous improvement of the strategies and stimulus spending, and then spent a lot of time on the long-term financial planning for sustainability and equity. Specifically, if you recall, focused on 3 big projects, which was examining our current state, historical and current state of special education programming, programs in-house, how much do we spend, how much do we spend on students that are in magnets and open choice for special education programs. Also looking at the teacher role and any opportunities there to reimagine the teacher role to support, our staff and our students, and the implications around Chef and the recent agreement. And so moving forward, what we'd like to do is to focus on 3 specific areas. One is assessing our implementation of the ROI. There's been a lot of conversation with the board and with some of us on the senior leadership team around return on investment. Specifically, they would provide analytic support to connect the investments to the intended outcomes, and also focusing on any changes that would need to happen from a budget perspective to accelerate spending. Chief Penn will speak a little bit more about that. And then also targeting design work for any new areas that we identify. In terms of the design piece, we've looked at the long-term financial sustainability, and there's one specific area that we have to go deeper on, and that is our multi-tiered systems of support, right? That is the strategies and the supports that exist for students, depending on the tier. So, right, tier 1 is supports and resources available to all students for them to access and meet their outcomes. But then we know that some other students might need additional support. So as they go up the tier, they need additional supports. And all of that connects to ultimately strengthening our programming so that students get the needs that they deserve when they need them, and then not to potentially further contribute to students that would need later on special education services, as an example. And so there are cost implications there. And so we would have to double down on that. And also looking at, now that the comprehensive school choice plan was approved as part of the Chef agreement, we have to think about what are the implications for us as a district. And so we have to continue now to look at specifically how does that play out across specific schools. And we also know that we potentially will have to think about right-sizing the district in the future. And so that's not a call that I make. Obviously, that's a call for the board. But we want to make sure that we are looking at that from a design perspective in a way that is inclusive of all stakeholders being part of that process, and that we also look at it from a financial sustainability perspective. And so, ERS was a partner when we first did this work with the first iteration of the DME. They're not going to be at the center of engagement, but they are, going to be at the center of working with Chief Penn closely around the financial sustainability piece, and also analyzing a lot of the data and the engagement the trends that we collect from any of the engagement that we do. So that is a mouthful, but I'll stop there to see if there are any questions for now.
Are there questions? If there's not, I have a couple questions, Superintendent. I'm asking it to you, but it's potentially directed towards Chief Penn. I want to be clear that this ERS, they're supporting you in terms of the financial analysis and financial modeling work, correct?
Particularly as it looks at the over the horizon kind of work that we're doing right now, that fiscal sustainability piece that looks out over a 5-year potential horizon. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I guess to the superintendent, as you were giving the remarks, where I have some pause is as I'm trying to understand the company ERS, right? I wouldn't be comfortable with them actively, I want to say, doing the design for the district. That's right. So I just want to understand, to me, they're providing the assumptions, and if you choose option A, here's what happened, here's what choosing option B. And so the understanding is your team's actually doing the design. They're feeding you with, here's the impact of your design. And obviously you're going to pick the most sustainable model that achieves your goals.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
they're going to not only look at the financial implications, but there's the enrollment component to that, right? And there are enrollment projections that have been made over the next 10 years. And then we have to overlay the recent agreement, right, which has implications around enrollment across all of our schools. And so, yes, we would do the engagement, we would do design work, and then they would filter that, right, through the financial sustainability as connected to the ESSER spending that we have to do by 2024, the other spending, GB and all the other entitlement grants. And, this special education backdrop that is so big for us in Hartford Public Schools, unlike any other district.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with that. So then, so I guess this is my comment. I mean, you've done a good job, I think, in laying out, here's why we're picking a certain path, and here's the implications of it. It would be good now moving forward, now to understand what ERS is doing, to maybe sometimes include, here are the assumptions they made, and here are the impacts of the 2 or 3 options, and here's why we picked number 1, right? Often you give me the option you picked. I wouldn't mind now seeing what they thought about the other options and why the other options weren't good. The other thing I'm hearing is they're going to help Chief Penn understand the best path to spend money, because we've had some challenges matching up spend with available resources and with priorities. Are they going to help you in that way too, Chief Penn, in terms of helping us understand, giving you available resources and what you have to go accomplish? Here's the best path forward.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, when we kicked off this work, one of the first things we looked at is historical spending being a predictor of future spending.
Okay.
And saying, okay, if we stay on the current path and do nothing, what happens?
Okay.
And the answer was we landed about a $20 or $30 million deficit 5 years out. So the question then became, how do we reposition some of these ESSER assets to figure out the best way to address long-term fiscal sustainability? So really that work is now twofold, right? We want to make sure that the money that we have available to us in ESSER is spent within the original guidelines of the operating plan that we laid out, but also make sure that the investments that we're making now lead to a reduction in that growth trajectory, so that our revenues and our expenses wind up being equal going forward, right? That's really what we're talking about for fiscal sustainability.
Okay.
And they have built, I would say, a very solid model with a number of different inputs that allow us to sort of tweak certain inputs within that model to say, if we did this, where do we land in 5 years? And we're working through some of that modeling right now to say, okay, how does this become more of a proactive tool for us for looking over the horizon? And then saying structurally, what potentially could we change, right? And that's really the optionality. I come out of a consulting background myself early in my career, and we never made the decision for the client, right? We would go back to the client and say, here's A, B, and C. Here are the advantages of each. Here are the disadvantages of each. And here's what's going to cost you to implement in all 3 of these cases. And then it really was up to the client to decide, what do we do going forward? And I would add one thing about ERS. We also very much get the benefit of them working with a number of large urban districts around the country that are struggling with some of the same issues. And so in that respect, they get to be a thought partner to us to say, have you thought about this? Or we saw another district do this, it may work here, would you consider that? And that's where a lot of the value from ERS comes through into us too. It's like we can certainly try not to be myopic when it comes to looking at our own issues, but when you hear that pretty much every CFO in their network is dealing with the same thing, that's where a lot of that benefit comes through as well.
No, thank you, Chief Penn. I think so. Sharing some of that with us, I think will be helpful to help educate the board too, and we can move forward. I will own that I'm coming at this one moment where somehow we have a little excess money. I realize the reality has been that you've probably been deficit spending, and every year you got to figure out, we got 10 things, we can only do 4. How do we pick the best 4? So this will all make more sense.
Chairman, I will confirm this is very uncommon territory for me. That's correct.
Okay. So that's what I was going to say. So when it comes back to that, we'll all understand the value of the ERS. Do we need to do anything to approve this, or is this just?
It does need to go on to the full board as a new contract.
I have
Okay.
a question on Tyrone first, Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Sorry. I just want to make sure I understand the time frame of the work that is to be completed. Is for the remainder of this school year, and it's at that price of the $375. I just want to make sure I understand that.
Actually, no, there's a pretty good breakdown of the cost that came in the summary. And if I may, I can go over that for you a little bit.
Okay.
So one of the things that
I see it here now, December 2022. I looked in the summary, just let you know, I looked in the summary to see like the timeline. I see the work. And then it's like I didn't scroll all the way down to see the timeline. So I'm fine. I just didn't understand why it was $375. It was going to only be the end of this academic year. So,
yeah, and actually some of the work takes us, the first 2 pieces of the work take us through August at a cost of around $200,000. And then there's the further discussion remaining on the last piece, which is the portfolio analysis that would run from August through August through December. So it's really through the end of the calendar year as opposed to the academic year.
Got it. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Can I just add also the reason why that third piece is happening later on? And that's because of it is dependent on significant engagement with our community and all stakeholders. And so it is not the best time to do that over the summer. So I want to be mindful of that.
Thank you. Are there further questions? So I guess then I will offer to the board members that are present. I see Board Member Oliver and Board Member Rigueur. If we are supportive of just moving this forward, I mean, I would support moving this forward. And Ms. Oliver, are you good moving this forward?
Agreed. Yes, agreed.
And Phil, I suppose you're supportive too of moving this to full board. Yeah.
Yeah, I joined late, but I'll trust you and Kim's
Okay.
decision on
Okay.
this.
Yeah, I was just deferring because I did see you come on. So thank you very much. So I think then we can move to item 2 if there's not more discussion, because there are a number of things on the docket today. So there's an E-rate application. Chief Penn, are you also kind of leading this discussion? I can't hear you on.
Sorry about that. I'll start the conversation briefly, and then Patrick Welch is here from MHIS to also help with the conversation. Patrick's our E-rate specialist, so he will know this program inside and out, obviously. But E-rate funds are basically a federal program that creates dollars available for school districts, underserved communities, things of that nature, to help them with connectivity. And it's a federal program that if you've ever looked at the bottom of your cell phone bill, your cable bill, and you've seen something called USF, that's Universal Service Fund. This is the way that the dollars actually flow back into local communities, is through this E-rate program. And what's been proposed here is a number of spends around 2 different classes of types of expenses that we have. Things like telecommunication services and internet access is in category 1. Category 2 is broadband, maintaining internal controls through switches and networks and routing cables and things of that nature. There's two different pieces here. And I think it provides about 85 or 90% funding based on the category, with the remainder picked up by the local community. And we have that local piece captured in our operating budget for MHIS for 22-23. So the local piece is already factored into the budget. And Patrick, feel free to jump in with any additional detail you think would be helpful for the board.
I couldn't have said any of that better myself. But yeah, basically the category 1 is the fiber connections, which ties all the schools together, and the internet access, and that is reimbursed at 90%. And then this application for the hardware is year 2 of upgrading the wireless systems in all the schools. So at the end of this funding year, all the wireless gear in all the schools would be upgraded to the latest and greatest, really putting us where we need to be as far as wireless communications goes.
That's exciting. Are there more details? And is there somebody, Chief Penn, on our side who's driving this? I guess from a strategic and tactical standpoint. I'm only asking because we had talked about possibly the district bringing on some full-time resources to really kind of own the whole IT infrastructure and broadband and media strategy for the district, and move away from the shared resource model with the city.
I think I see Chief Davis Googe with her hand up. I think she could probably address that question.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Good
Chief.
morning. Good morning. I think what I would add to what has been said already is that I work closely with MHIS as the liaison, as the Chief Operating Officer. And so I actually don't have the list of schools with me. Pat and we actually talk every year about this time, about the schools that are going to get the upgrade of the wireless access points. So again, as we move forward with making sure that all our schools have the technology infrastructure in place, I work closely with MHIS. So that's where we are now in terms of our infrastructure planning. Weekly meeting with Sharice Snipes to, again, plan for all our activities going forward.
Okay, thank you, Chief Davis Googe. The plan that you're speaking of, does that primarily run through the Finance and Audit Committee, or is there another committee through whom this plan is reviewed or approved? Or
yeah, and so the fact is that we're in the process. So with this one, right, with the infrastructure and the E-rate, it always comes through the Finance Committee.
Okay.
As far as the ongoing planning, I think that's a conversation we need to have going forward. In this moment, there's no dollars attached. It's just about, so for instance, in this past week, we done some work around asset tagging our devices and things as we continue to spend down the funding for ESSER and ARP. And so as we work to build that infrastructure to continue to ensure that we are guarding and protecting our devices, that work is just in the planning stages. So as we move forward with it, I think Chief Penn and other chiefs, we will have those discussions, also including Dr. Silver in that work, because some of this will fall under policy.
Okay, thank you, Chief Davis Googe. Are there further questions? Board members, or if there are no further questions, then, oh, Dr. Schmerling's joined in. Good morning, Dr. Schmerling.
Good morning.
And Morning. So, Chief David Scooch, I say as chair, it would be great to see at a future meeting. I don't have an immediate timeline, but let's just say before August, a clear picture of what's going to be accomplished. There are two. It seems like there's two paths we're going through: infrastructure and then kind of connectivity. So, if I'm listening to Mr. Welch, there's a sense of we're going to have a certain amount of coverage, be done by a certain time period. It'd be great to see some kind of overall timeline and here are the schools, here's the timeline, here's what we're envisioning as relates to the next, year, 18 months. And we can kind of have a sense of, like burn down, as it were. And if there's some other, obligation we need to meet, we'll have a timeline for that and just a clear picture. And then at this level, it's just a matter of then of just seeing the burn down, the spin, and we can just see how it goes over the next year or so. Is that sensible, Chief David Scooch?
Absolutely. Yep. We can certainly plan for it and share with you what was done last year in terms of the upgrade of the wireless points and where we're going this year. And again, as we continue to plan our one-to-one infrastructure, I will make sure I keep this committee abreast of that planning.
Okay. Thank you very much. If there aren't further questions or comments, we're moving this forward too. So I'm just going to get agreement with the other board members. Now I see board member Brody and Oliver and Dr. Smerling. Are we in agreement to move this to the full board?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. The one thing I would recommend is if we can put this on a consent agenda item, if the committee would consider that.
I am fine with that as well. I'm fine with that.
I'm good with that.
Brody, are you good? I see Phil's okay too.
If we feel that board members will not have questions, that to me, determines if it's on a consent or not.
Yeah. Okay. I'm fine to bring that up. So I guess board member Oliver, if there's questions, I think we're able to kind of pull it out of the consent and just have conversation about it.
Yeah, I just bring it up because traditionally, every year we get this application and we have not had questions in the past, and just wanted to make it a recommendation on the committee. I also see our board chair's hand up, so I'll to whatever the committee decides.
So Phil, can you confirm? I'm okay with the consent thing as long as we can pull it out if you need to. Phil, is that a good approach?
Yeah, there'll have to be I believe there have to be a motion to move it out. My one caveat or comment is I would encourage the board to ask questions about this particular application and not the overall strategy or a particular policy change. That's yes. So we can try to keep the conversation scoped. I think that's fair, because this is really, if I'm understanding it, this is more or less just a continuance of the same program. Correct? That is correct.
Okay. So there is no change. So we can emphasize that and talking to it. So board member Brody, are you okay with that approach?
I'm okay with whatever the committee is okay with.
Okay. So the approach here is going to be because this is going to be I think presented as a continuance. We'll start it in
consent. And with the understanding that if board members have questions about this, that there's a mechanism to pull it out of the consent and have discussion about it. And so I will leave it to Phil, our board member, Chair Rigueur, at at the overall Board of Ed meeting to just bring those comments forward as we're talking about this.
Yeah, Chairman Walker, I appreciate that. The one, I guess, additional recommendation, if possible, as we capture the meeting notes for today, just to make sure that we capture some of the comments as it relates to the continuance of this particular item, and really being descriptive of what's being put forth in the consent agenda.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll take that as an action to add a comment to capturing this discussion.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It needs to be a distinction as to, because we talked a lot in the family community engagement about the Wi-Fi, the city project. Make sure it's clear on what we're talking about, so people who are in that committee don't get confused and start talking about Wi-Fi and thinking this is that and that, and it may get a little bit confusing there. So just so it's clear what this is and it's not that.
Yes, Board Member Brody, I actually was thinking that myself, and so we'll have to just articulate that.
Yes.
And because what I'm doing is, in today's discussion, I'm looking for the place in which that will be, so that at the board meeting, we can point out that discussion will be covered here, right, at this other topic area. So yeah, I'll capture that in the notes too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. One of, yes, who? Yes,
Okay,
Chief.
It's Chief Penn.
Yes, Chief.
All right, so our next item on the agenda is an acceptance of funds for a school security grant provided by DESPP. Chief Roberts is on the Zoom with us this morning for additional questions that may come up as a result of this, but roughly every 18 months or so, DESPP opens up to a competitive grant process, applications for school security work to be done around various schools. And I've seen a wide variety of items go through that space in the 7 years that I've been in municipal education. In this particular case, it's the acceptance of a grant totaling $123,360. That's the state share, with a local match of $30,840 for security cameras, things like storage servers, uninterruptible power supplies, dual monitor stations to observe the cameras, things of that nature, taking place at Milner School, Betances Early Reading, and Sanchez. And there's an overview in board docs, and that the agenda item attachment has the actual terms of the grant itself. And these are it's essentially the same terms that I've seen for the last 7 years in terms of looking at these, that I'm comfortable that we have the local match within the scope of the budget for the security department. So we're bringing this forward today for an approval to accept the funds. And Director Roberts, I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to add to that in terms of, what the grant will do for us.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everyone. Through the chair, this project is very important that we update our schools. As you know, our schools are kind of antiquated, and what we're using currently is outdated. So we really need to, it's critical that we upgrade all the old camera systems. It will give us better service, because what we have now is 5+ years old. We really need to get up to speed. And as you know, we have 45 schools and 39 buildings. And I have 105 officers, and sometimes it's very difficult to be able all the time. As you know, my major function is to coordinate, supervise, and evaluate all security issues pertaining to all our schools, that includes students, families, and the staff.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Roberts. Well, I guess you'll always be Chief Roberts to me. So,
Thank you, thank you.
So, Chief Penn, you mentioned accepting funds. So, at this Finance Audit Committee meeting, we have to approve that request today. Is that not going to the full board? That's being approved right now at this committee level?
It's approved here first, and then it'll move on to the full board.
Okay, all right. I just want to be clear. So, so from a procedure standpoint, do I need to get a motion in a second, or can, as chair, am I allowed to just put this out as an item for approval by the members of the committee?
Oh, I don't think it requires a formal vote. I think you just say that the committee is moving it forward to the full board if that's the committee's desire.
Okay. All right. Are there questions? Let me ask that first. So among the members of the committee, are there questions on this continued work? Yeah, Chair Rigueur.
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you. And it's not necessarily pertaining to this particular item, but Dr. Roberts, you some of the comments that you made, I'm wondering, and Chief Penn, from a policy perspective, identifying the gaps that we have from a district, and then more importantly, what's our risk as it relates to security and surveillance? From what I just heard, it sounds like there's a major challenge in some areas, and would love to just better understand that from an overall picture.
Through the chair, it's paramount to me that we keep up with the times. You know, the stuff that we have right now needs to be updated. You know, we don't have any underlying major security threats, but we always want to be in front of it. You know, we're one of the largest districts in this region. As you know, as I said earlier, we have 45 schools and 39 buildings throughout our city. As you know, I consider myself a subject matter expert. I've served the city for over 30 years as a police officer, ascending to the rank of chief and retired as a chief. So I understand what it means to be safe. I'm also, you know, perception is everything. And we got to make sure that our families understand that we're doing all we can to create a safe and healthy learning environment for everybody that comes to our buildings. And it's important that we see what's going on, that we see what's going on. We want to implement a rapid program which will identify all visitors as sex offenders. We need to keep up with technology. It is important that we stay on top of things because we need to create a safe, healthy learning environment for everybody that enters all of our buildings. And that's very important to me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I guess what I'm asking is the same kind of due diligence that you and your team took as it relates to this grant money and applying it to I believe the 3 schools that were identified for this particular round of funding. Could we take a similar approach to see where do we have potential gaps, or where can we potentially improve our capabilities? Does that make sense?
I'm sorry. Just through the chair once again.
Yes.
You know, I'm huge on training on officers. I'm sorry, I had some background noise. Excuse me. I'm huge on making sure that we provide services for all of our schools. And to answer your question, we do all the training that we can, and right now we go and improve our ability to see everything, parking lots, areas of the building that we are blind to. Right now we've improved on, we're going from what we call Nouveau to Milestone, which is more, we can see it on the computer, we can see it on our phones. So it's going to just keep us up with technology. That's important that we stay in lockstep with what's going on around the world.
I guess going to say Chief Roberts again. I think what I'm hearing, and I guess I'll try to frame it as an action. Your team has already done some assessment, and at some point you're going to create a list of here's the infrastructure we're going to update, and here's why we're updating that infrastructure, right? Like you're talking about new software or new cameras. There's going to be some type of work you're going to do. I think what I'm hearing, it would be good to have that information shared, I think, with the board, so we get an idea of what's the enhancements being done when your team kind of works out that detail. So we'll understand it, we'll understand what's happening this year, and then, expect to see then similar kinds of upgrades as you move forward to future years, right? If what you're implementing will be the latest and greatest, then it's just maybe you're understanding what that is and kind of the why. And does that make sense, Chief Roberts?
Through you, Sir Chair, that does make sense. And I did put that in a narrative when we actually applied for the grant. This is not the first time we received this grant. I believe it's the third time and the second time under my watch. So we're constantly improving. Last year we put in the Raptor system. I'm always evaluating our services because security is paramount and nothing happens unless our schools are safe. Education cannot take place. That is my primary function, is to coordinate, supervise, and evaluate, and I do this routinely. And this is just not a once in a while thing. This is not just once when the grant comes up. I'm constantly looking at ways to improve our services as we protect our children, families, and our staff.
So thank you. And so I will go back and review and reread that, and if everything is covered, then I'd be satisfied there. Board Member Brody, you have a question?
Yes, are we listing the schools that have received upgrades over the years? Because that I can easily see that as being a question.
Yes, ma'am. And that is listed in last year's receipt that we received, and this year I applied again, and we were successful again this year. We actually applied for 11 schools, but the funding is statewide. We didn't get the lion's share. We got what we needed for the schools, as Chief Penn stated: Milner, Patunks Early Reading, and Sanchez. Those were kind of like 3 of our priority schools this time. Once again, this is a security grant program that is statewide, is shared throughout the entire state. I don't think we got the lion's share, but we did get a good amount.
Okay, and I have one more question, one comment, because I believe this is the one that board members were invited, because it was a very robust conversation around this a couple years ago, I believe. And I believe some board members was like, well, could we come and see what this is? Because it was really it was very interesting. So that's the comment. The question is, I know also that it was some discussion around the expectation of a parent or a visitor, like around, because we mentioned background, right?
I'm sorry, man. I think you're talking about the Raptor program. My expectation is this: is very simple. Everyone in the school needs to be identified. You got to go through the Raptor system. We identify you, and then you wait until the person you're coming to visit comes and takes you to where you need to go. I take safety and security very seriously. So when you come through our doors, you have to be vetted. You have to go through the Raptor system. You got to come in when you just can't show up, unannounced. You have to have a visit. You have to have a planned visit, and then you get to where you need to be. Because as you know, times have changed. We have a lot of intruders who get into buildings with nefarious intentions, and it's my responsibility to make our schools as safe as possible. So yes, you're right, Chairperson Brody. I'm sorry, Madam Brody. You're right. When you come to our schools, there is a process that everyone has to go through, and that's the Raptor program. You go through that front door, you get vetted, you identify, and you get announced. I take that very seriously, and I do not deviate, and I will not compromise that.
Yeah, so what I am saying is that since we've discussed this publicly before we have new families to our district. So I think it will only be in the best interest at this time to make that clear, because I don't believe that's clear to everyone. And if we can explain why this happens when you visit our schools, because I don't know if people, that can be happening, but do we know that's happening? Like, is it clear to the visitor? So I just think this is an opportunity to make that clear. So a parent say, so it won't be no issue. We discussed it. We talked about it publicly. This is what happens when you come to our schools, because this is my first time hearing it again since the last time we discussed it. That's all I'm saying.
Understood.
Member Brody, I think you're making a great point. And I want to move forward. I'm not sure quite who to give that action to. Clearly, Chief Roberts, you can provide some information, but that feels like a communication and engagement issue. And
I will say this, Sir Chair.
Yes.
Most schools have it posted what the process is. And I'm sure it goes home in the parent handbook and the PTA meeting. They understand that when you come to school, you have to go through the main office, go through the Raptor program, through security, you get vetted. Now, if a parent does not understand that, then we need to ensure that we get that out to them. It's usually done through the principals and the EDLs.
I think that's what's being expressed, because I am not confident that everybody has the understanding. I think it is known for some. So I think we'll take that. I think I'll ask, I guess, Chief Davis Googe, is there a sense of who would own that idea of, because this is really a communication issue. This is really more of a communication and engagement issue, not necessarily a technical security issue. That everyone is aware we're updating, and this is kind of the newer approach with maybe, do we think that's well understood, or is there the need to do kind of just an annualized kind of communication to parents and stakeholders?
So I would probably defer that question to Chief Black-Burke, who oversees family engagement. But we can certainly huddle here at the cabinet to make sure that families, to determine the best path for that information to be given to our families. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think that's right. Okay. Chief Black-Burke, I'm trying to, I guess, place this comment somewhere, because it's not quite a finance question, and it may come up at that upcoming FCE type of committee meeting. So I guess Chief Black-Burke, is this an area that will fall under your purview? This idea of communicating to parents about any changes around, the access procedures and changes in that regard in terms of parents coming into the school and interacting with staff. And yeah, that's my feeling on the communication. So.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is actually something that family engagement and communications we team on. So when we brought Raptor into the district, we did take time to share it with our families. So it is definitely an engagement, as you said, an engagement and communication piece. And I agree with Ms. Davis-Googe, we can revisit it, but I do know that families did receive that information as to why we are moving forward with Raptor. So we can discuss it further. And I think with each upcoming school year, that's information that does need to go out to families again and again, but it is a communication and an engagement piece that we team on.
Okay, that's great. So now that we have a place to put it, we can move forward in this meeting, but we will bring this up again and family and community engagement. I think Board Member Brody and I are part of that committee. And so this will just be a topic we will reserve for that meeting. So Member Brody, are you fine with that approach? We'll bring it up at the upcoming FCE meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I'm trying to, because we're running short, I want to make sure we can get, we still
Walker,
have,
you want to, Mr. Schmerling's got his hand raised?
oh, Dr. Schmeling, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, it's okay. I didn't know if you needed a motion to accept this grant. I think that was the. I heard
Yeah,
at the beginning of all this. If so, I'll make that motion.
Well, I think I was told I can dispense on the formal
Okay.
motions, but I will put out approval. So between yourself, Dr. Schmeling, and Board Member Oliver Brody, and I guess Chair Rigor, can we approve this, accepting these grants? Right. I think Phil is approving. Dr. Schmeling,
Yeah,
are you approving?
Yes.
Board Member Oliver?
Yep.
And Board Member Brody?
Yes.
Okay, so this has been approved. We have accepted this. So Chief Penn, is that the level of approval that you need here to accept this grant so we can move forward with it?
Yes, sir. We're good.
Okay,
So this will now go to the full board in about a week.
okay, perfect.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, Chief Roberts. Now we have. Hang on here.
Should be the
Okay.
Love Your Block grant, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I see it. I'm now. We have that. Then McKinney, Vento, and FRC acceptance of funds. So I'm gonna just ask us here if there's a potential for us to be efficient, so we can at least get through these items in the regular meeting in the time we have allocated. So
I will certainly speak as quickly as I can, Mr. Chair.
perfect. Chief Ben.
Okay, the next one is an application for a grant called a Love Your Block grant. The only interesting item around this is it's actually the city of Hartford is actually the grantor in this case. And you'll see in your board docs the description of the grant, how this will be at Sand School. I know we have folks on the call today. I believe Mr. Lachi was part of this. I believe Ms. Black Burke was part of this. So if there's specific questions around the mural itself or the $18,000, I'll defer to them. But this is a fairly small grant designed to enhance the beauty of the school.
And I'll hop in there just to say, really what we're asking approval for here, our idea was approved to move on to the full application. So they've already approved the initial idea of the project. What they need here is permission from the owners of the building to affix the mural to the side of the building. So the mural won't be painted directly onto the building. It will be printed on a vinyl sign. And then Sign Pro is going to come in and affix that to the side of the building. So the city of Hartford is just looking for permission from you as the board and us as Hartford Public Schools, an entity of the city government, to approve or provide permission for the mural. So if there's any other questions around details, feel free to ask. But at this stage, that's all we're asking for.
Chairman Walker, if I may.
Yes.
Just wanted to bring to light that this was actually a project that was put on hold from last year. It actually went through school choice and facilities, and at that time, it was approved to move forward.
Oh, then is there a role for us to play? Is this just informational for us?
I think.
Once again, Mr. Chair, this is an application to accept the grant or an applicant, excuse me, you need to approve the application process. So again, this is an item to be moved to the full board for consent.
Okay.
And this may be an item, given the low dollar value, that would be appropriate to consider for the consent agenda.
Totally agree. All right. I just want to clarify because I heard what was said by Mr. Schillaci. And so, yes, I would approve moving this forward and would also see if Board Member Oliver and Brody and Board Member Swirling, if you are in agreement to approve moving this forward to the full board. And I accept also the recommendation of putting it on the consent agenda. It's only $25,000.
Support it.
Okay.
Agreed. This is Kim.
Yep. Board Member Brody.
I have a quick question. So
Okay.
the school was identified, if I'm remembering this correctly, we did some surveying of parents as to their approval of what's going on their school building. Is this the one, if I'm remembering it correctly? It was some discussion with families.
Chief Davis Gooch, would you happen to know?
I would have to go back. It started with Principal Heredia and his.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if it's saying school, yes.
Yes.
If it's saying schools, I remember when this was, and it was discussed, there was some input from family. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So Board Member Brody, you're in approval of this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So to the boards and those who are listening, the details says that this will be at Sand School. It seemed like there are two elements of this. Mr. Schillaci brought up the first element, and then there's a plywood secondary approach. And so it sounds like a mural that will be attached to the building, so it could obviously be removed at a future date and time if needed. But all right, so we're moving forward with that, and we can then move to item the McKinney-Vento acceptance of funds as well. And this is the larger program that we talked about at this is the one I think that the Family and Community Engagement Committee talked about. So I think this is where maybe some of those issues we talked about around Wi-Fi and things may come up. But Chief Penn, do you want to talk about this?
I'm just going to have very brief comments on this one, Mr. Chair, and then turn it over to the experts on this grant. This one, as you know, is also part of the COVID-19 response under ARP-ESSER. Typically we see a homeless assistance grant typically in the $50,000 to $60,000 range per year. We receive that pretty much every year, but this one in particular was a very outsized grant totaling almost $400,000. So there's been a lot of work that's been done over the past few months trying to align the needs of the homeless students that we have. And there's nearly 300 of them that we've identified. And it's a question of how to best resource them to be successful as students going forward. And you'll see in board docs an outline at a high level of how the funds are to be spent. And in addition, there is a backup document as well with additional detail. And this time, since I misstated it earlier, I think it's, I believe, Chief Black Burke that was supporting this grant. And I think Lawrence Schillaci also had a role in the assistance here as well.
Yes, thank you, Chief Penn. I want to quickly give the floor to Chief Black Burke to just give us the brief highlights of this grant and its goals.
Thank you, Chairman Walker. So these ARP-ESSER funds, the goal is to provide immediate needs, as Chief Penn shared, to our homeless and displaced families, and also working to connect those families to the broader network of community-based partners. The total award amount, $397,612. And in the backup, you will find how the monies are broken down as it relates to hygiene kits, school supplies, undergarments for boys and girls, hotspots, and also cell phones. Also looking at hiring a homeless and family service program assistant for this particular grant. And I think those are the major highlights of this grant. And again, we already have well over 200 plus homeless students for this particular school year. So these funds will go to assist that need and be able to provide immediate response to them.
Thank you very much, Chief Blackbird. And so while that's sitting there, are there questions on this for this grant? And okay, I can't see hands at this point. We're in a different view here. Let me switch. Okay. Okay, if there's no questions, then I will say, okay, thank you. I will say briefly, if there aren't questions, that this was discussed at Family Community Engagement Committee, and there's broad agreement in providing the material needs that families will have. I think Chief Blackbird brought up the fact that there's a growing number of families who are in this situation of transitional housing or housing insecurity. The one area of some discussion was around the hotspot and the cell phones, and so I think what Brody was talking about is when this was the area where if people have discussion about Wi-Fi and it's about this program, it's not about the earlier program that Mr. Welch is working on. So I just want to be that when we get to the main board meeting, understand that this would be the area where I think there was some discussion about Wi-Fi and hotspots, and it's mostly because the state's also providing funds in this area. And we made some recommendation that we would use the grant funding as well as coordinating with the state to make sure we're best using the available resources to provide hotspots and cell phones to families in need. Question, Chair Rigor?
Yeah, thank you. So as it relates to this grant, and I guess Chief Penn and Chief Burke, this is probably a combination question. Do we have an idea of the annual dollar amount per student that's needed to keep them, I guess, whole or as whole as possible as it relates to engaging with Hartford Public Schools? Like, is there a number? What's the number needed for a student to be in a position to learn?
So I'll begin the answer and be very candid that I've not considered a question like that. You know, I appreciate the nature of what you're asking. I suspect that each student needs are going to be fairly unique, that there's no cookie cutter kind of approach to how we address each individual circumstance. But I'm happy to kind of take that away as an exercise to work with the team in figuring out how we would look at that. But I guess I've never considered the question from that perspective before.
Yeah, so as I'm thinking about it is, as grants come in and so forth, I guess from my view, I want to have a better understanding of how particular categories are being picked, how what formula is being used to allocate X amount of funds and so forth. So at the very least, establishing a baseline to say, okay, maybe this is what, a kid that's in transition or a student that's transition, this is the minimum need that they need. And to the extent that we could do more than that, great. And here's a possible approach of doing that. Because right now, as I look back at that screen, I think you could ask the question, well, do they really need Wi-Fi if the city's going Wi-Fi? Do they really need XYZ if they have some services here and so forth? So for me, I think what we're doing is great. I'm not questioning that. It's just, I just want to have a better idea of the methodology behind how we're allocating the funds and if we can establish some type of baseline.
Okay.
So, thank you, Chair Rigueur, and I'm going to give an opportunity to Chief Blackburg if you'd like to offer any input, because Chair Rigueur, this was the exact type of conversation that was had at the Family Community Engagement Committee. I think similar type of tone of question came up. So Chief Blackburg, maybe you, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Thank you, Chairman Walker, and thank you, Chairman Rigueur, for the question. And Chief Penn, yes, I think that's definitely something we could work through. But in looking at the allocations for this particular grant, it was spun from what we receive often as requests from our homeless and displaced families. So what is it that they're asking for repeatedly? And also, as I shared at the FCE committee meeting, that when we do have homeless and displaced families, not all the time are they allotted a space in a shelter or a transitional facility in the Hartford area. So if they are in a transitional facility outside, because we do have a responsibility wherever that first open space becomes available, that's where they need to go, take that space, and we would be responsible for busing them to and from the district while they are in transition. So they may not be able to pull on Wi-Fi or fiber here in the city, but ensuring that those students still have an opportunity to engage in any work or assignments that they have. We provide like hotspots to the family. But the question that you asked, I would definitely team with Chief Penn and look at how we are coming up with that particular figure. But based on these allocations, they were looked at through our McKinney-Vento coordinator based on the requests that we receive repeatedly from families who are displaced.
If I can add, Chief Blackburg, too, I think the details not shown there, but one of the things that I think we agreed upon with your recommendation of a program assistant, because we don't have hard numbers, I think there was agreement that this program assistant would be the person who would, on the front end, would do the analysis, would monitor, make sure criteria is followed, track who got what, to make sure that we're considering or assessing, hopefully, as you said, Chairman Rigueur, is it in the city? Can we use the city funds? Can we use state? So at least in the interim, it seemed like that program assistant person was going to do some of this kind of analysis of the recipients and the ask. So I think that was the understanding, right, Chief Blackburg?
That is correct. We would want that program assistant to do both, do roll-up and analysis, and also serve as like case manager with those particular families.
Right. And how much is being allocated to this program assistant / case manager from the grant?
The allocation is $66,648 plus fringe.
So this goes back to my initial question. What does $66,000, what's that impact to students if that was reallocated to the students? Like how much more students can we serve? What other services get? It's like, I don't have, like, I don't know the methodology in which you guys are approaching this. Like, there's no baseline for me. So as I hear is $400K and 60 going to a program assistant where there's a need with kids in transition, I will tell you right now that I want to revisit that approach.
Chairman Rigueur, can you, that exact question came up at FCE too. So can we take this into an action? What is, Chairman Rigueur, what is it precisely you want from Chief Blackburg now? Yeah.
I guess what I'm looking for, and you know, I'll look toward other members, is I just need a better idea of the methodology in which we're allocating these funds and what are we really what are we really getting out of this program assistant for 60K that we potentially might have already in-house? If it's a capacity issue, then sure, we can have that conversation. But I just want to make sure that this 60K that's meant for the most vulnerable scholars that we have, they get an opportunity to leverage those dollars. And I'm not questioning the program assistant. There might be value there. I just need to see how it stacks up in terms of the methodology and the impact.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Rigueur. I want to give, hold on to that response. I want to see, Board Member Brody, you have a question too. It may be in the same area. Chair, Board Member Brody, you had a question as well?
Yeah, I could save my comments and questions for the board meeting. My question was, is this on consent? Because the same, it's almost as if Mr. Rigueur was in our meeting, right? We had the same concerns, like did we consider where Wi-Fi that the city provides is, and it just was, for me, it just was the things that would have been considered prior to, and now we have to go back and consider those things. So I'm still a little confused myself of, like, I still have questions. So but I can save my questions for the board meeting, but it is, I have the same like feel.
Okay, so let me answer the, yes.
Chair Walker, I guess the question is, Chief Penn, are we able to accept the funds, which is a grant? And then I think part B is, which was Board Member Brody speaking to, is the programming of those funds. Like, so if we accept the grant, are we tied to a specific programming or allocation of those funds, or do we accept the funds and will we still have the opportunity to double click on some of these questions and make sure that the funds are being allocated or at least discussed in an appropriate manner?
So if I can answer that question, Mr. Chair, you know, like most of our grants, we have an opportunity to go back to the state and file a revised proposed grant budget with them. That would then be subject to their review and acceptance as well. But we could certainly accept the money now pending further review. And if we determine that there's a need to go revise the grant budget with the state, we certainly could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the only I appreciate that, and it's not necessary to revise the objective of the grant, which is to help kids, right? Like that's where I'm at. Is let's just make sure we're truly able to help as many kids as possible.
Okay, so let me address one question. Board Member Brody asked about consent agenda. My recommendation would be not to put this on the consent agenda, because as you can tell from the day, this is going to be an area of some conversation. I think it needs to be spiked out as its own line item in the meeting discussion. And while we didn't, I'm going to also offer this and then take a question from Dr. Smerling and let Chief Blackburn give a response. When I asked the same challenge at the FC&E committee meeting, the Welcome Center, at least qualitatively, gave the response that they didn't currently have sufficient resources to administer the program effectively. They felt like they were shorthanded already for the need that's out there and felt like they needed some additional support. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a newly funded head. I think the challenge that was put out there is, is there a resource available somewhere? And that's just really hard to answer on the fly. So I'll hand it to Chief Blackburn, but I know that people who currently administer this program were saying they needed some assistance and help. Did I characterize that right, Chief Blackburn?
So thank you, Chairman Walker. So the Welcome Center team consists of the Welcome Center coordinator, the director, Ms. Fagan, who is also the district ombudsman, and a McKinney-Vento coordinator who has been doing an amazing job in our district, ensuring that students and families who are displaced, that their needs are being met. This was included, the program assistant, as we look to expand this work, and knowing that we've already hit about 200 additional students for this particular school year, and looking at assistance to ensure that we are meeting those needs with much more efficiency and just even quicker. So that's where that came from, the need to add an additional program assistant to our current McKinney-Vento coordinator. Excuse me. And thinking about a district of our size, having one person really field and do that work, it's a conversation that maybe I should be looking at having a further conversation. I know sustainability came up. So maybe that's something after this grant, we look to add this to our regular budget. So we have a McKinney-Vento, director, leader, but then we also have a program assistant to help with that particular pot of the work. So just wanted to add that, but you were correct that sustainability piece did come up in our committee, and just thinking about how, as we look forward, if this is put into play, how do we add this in the future to shore up the work and ensure that families are being met with the utmost efficiency that they need?
Dr. Smerling, Board Member Smerling, question?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the process. So if I'm correct in my understanding, the school district submitted the grant, which included the allocation of how the dollars would be spent. The grant's been approved. We're being asked to accept the grant. If that's the case, then I'm wondering, just in terms of process, when it gets to us for this kind of discussion, would it help streamline this if on the front end, when a grant is being submitted, that we have the chance to ask these questions and get clarification, so that we're not second guessing ourselves once we receive the grant? Now we're going to go back and maybe take another look at how those dollars are being allocated. Is there a better way to do this rather than after the fact coming to this committee for approval and then encountering these kinds of questions? It's just, could delay the process and actually delay dollars being spent to support these kids.
So, thank you, Board Member Smerling, sorry. And again, I'll give Chief Blackburg the final word. This also came up in the committee meeting, and what we were informed is to actually apply for the grant, the state dictates that at least a pro forma budget be incorporated as part of the grant application. And so they had to come up with some type of budget idea. And yeah, so I'll let Chief Blackburg, you can talk a little more about the process, but it seemed like there wasn't a way to get around having to submit some type of a draft idea of how the money will be spent.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Yes, that is accurate. We submitted through the state system, and in this particular situation, we did need to submit some sort of budget frame in order to have the actual submission go through. As Chief Penn shared, that we do have an opportunity. We can, after discussions, we can go back and we have a window that we can provide adjustments for anything that has been submitted.
So if there aren't further questions, are we satisfied enough that we can at least accept the money? Can I get an approval that we can bring at least this item to the full board to at least accept the grant money, with the idea that we're going to work the details out of do we need an extra head or not, or exactly how the money will be allocated. Chairman Rigueur gives an approval thumbs up. Board Member Smerling, would you approve at least moving forward accepting the grant?
Absolutely, let's accept the money.
Okay, Board Member Oliver, Board Member Brody. This will be a separate item of discussion, Chair, Board Member Brody. This is not going to be consent.
Yeah, I say accept the money and we can deal with the other part.
Okay. So then we've approved moving this to the full board for the, for approval at the board meeting. And thank you. This was a worthwhile discussion. Amazing how it mirrored the same discussion that we had. So at least it confirms we all have the same kinds of concerns about this type of program. Let me see what's next. The FRC acceptance of funds and then budget transfer. Chief Penn, I think this is pretty straightforward. Do you want to talk briefly about the FRC continuation of expansion of
Agreed,
program?
Mr. Chairman. I would characterize this as straightforward as well. It's $125,000 federal grant split among 5 FRC sites, 25,000 to each of the 5. 4 of the sites, Burns, Rawson, Sand, and Wish. The program is operated by the Village for Families and Children. The 5th site at Sanchez is operated by the Hispanic Health Council. These are grants that we accept on a fairly routine basis within the district. We expect to expend the funds over about an 18-month period from January of 22 through July of 2023. And you'll see that there's additional details in the attachment that was included with board docs. But this one is a fairly straightforward grant.
Okay.
And once again, if I may, Mr. Chair, again, it's about the acceptance of the funds.
Okay. I will say there are questions that we have. The details of how each school wants to spend. And again, this is $25,000, so it's not big money, but the schools each individually articulated what they're planning to do with their families and whatnot with their funds. Okay, so Chairman Rigueur is approving moving forward. Board Member Oliver, are you satisfied to move forward?
Yes, thank you.
Board Member Brody? And
Yes.
Board Member Schmerling?
Yes.
Okay, then that's, I think that's a consensus. Let's move forward with that. And we have one final topic here, a budget transfer. Chief Penn.
Muted. Apologize, I had myself on mute again. Mr. Chair, there's actually 5 different transfers, 2 of which can be dealt with at this level, 3 of which need to go on to the full board on the consent agenda. These transfers are very typical as we get into this later stage of the school year. It's not unique to Hartford. I've encountered this everywhere I've worked as we shift money around from various budget lines to other budget lines. The emphatic piece I want to communicate, though, is that these transfers net to zero. And what I mean is, if we increase certain budget lines by $100,000, we're decreasing other budget lines by $100,000 so that the overall appropriation for our budget doesn't change. It's just moving it from one bucket to another. The 2 that do not require going on to the full board are transfer 621. That reflected a revision to the SIG grant for WISH, and 699. That one was shifting funds around at SMSA. As you know, there had to be remediation because of what happened there recently. So we're freeing up the funds to pay for that remediation that took place. The other 3 that go on to the full board, Journal 617 and Journal 1670 are both related. We have $5.6 million in a non-lapsing account held in the city. We did budgetary transfers to address those $5.6 million so that the funds, since we do not need them for 21-22, will be protected until at least 22-23, meaning we'll have available to us if needed for the next budgetary year. And then lastly, transfer 1690 is moving around anticipated surplus in transportation to cover deficits in utility accounts. And you'll actually see detail on the why we have the additional expenditures in the utility accounts in the monthly financial report I provided for the board.
Can I get approval to move this all forward? I'm running out of time. So Board Member Oliver, before you leave, are you can you approve us doing the transfers of the 2 that this committee can approve, and then the 3 that need to move on to the full board?
Approved.
Okay, Board Member Brody,
Yes.
Board Member Schmerling,
Yes.
Chairman Rigueur.
Yes, and just for clarification, I believe the 3 that have to go to the board are going to be part of the consent agenda, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then the other 2 will be de facto approved today at this committee level. And again, the takeaway is this is a net no change in actual budget, just a shifting to better meet the priorities and goals we have, right, in the short term and then the near term, Chief Penn.
That's
correct. Okay, so it's 10 o'clock. I want to ask, because right now we've gotten through the items for the committee. There's an amendment, and then there's some kind of reporting. I want to, I guess, ask, is there something critical of the remaining items? Because I'm thinking kind of reports can probably be pushed off one meeting.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, what I would recommend is that the monthly reports can be reviewed at the board's leisure. If there's questions, they can be emailed through the Christina or through yourself.
Yes.
With respect to the presentation from Mr. Lacci, I hate to do it to her again, but we could certainly defer that. I would summarize by saying we're very happy to have Lauren here because she's doing a great job for us on a number of different fronts.
Great.
The one piece I would request, if we can do today, because it is time sensitive, is
Yes.
the Qualtrics amendment.
Yes.
And you may be having deja vu because you probably be thinking, didn't we already deal with Qualtrics? You approved this as a board when it first went over a $50,000 contract. This is now to add on a $9,500 module to the contract, which would then add some additional functionality to Office of Talent Management. And you'll see the explanation as to what that's going to do for us.
Yes.
But we do want to try and get that module in place. So I would like to move that forward.
Yes. So just to expedite this, the additional money, Chief Penn, the $9,500 is for, I guess I'm going to call it organizational license so that they can use this extra feature from Qualtrics.
That is correct.
Okay. And it's a module that allows survey process to move forward, and hopefully I've kind of captured that. I mean, the surveying seems like it has several different roles and functions, but it's a surveying modular feature.
That is correct.
Qualtrics.
And it gives us some additional capability for measuring employee satisfaction and engagement. Particularly, we can capture data that's more anonymous in terms of exit interviews, things of that nature. So there is a lot of things that functionality that we have capabilities for by adding this on. And I think it's features that our OTM organization will benefit greatly from having on board.
Thank you, Chief Penn. I'm satisfied to, we're just approving this additional add-on to a previously approved budget line item. So
that is correct. It's a bolt on to an existing contract. So it increases the contract value, which is why we're here with you.
Correct. Thank you. So I'm seeking approval for board members, Chairperson or Chairman Rigueur. You good to move?
Yeah, I'm fine moving forward.
Board Member Schmerling.
Yes.
Chairperson Brody.
So point of clarification. So is
Yes.
this to approve it or approve it to have a board discussion around it?
At this level, we'll be approving it. And if it's approved here, we can move forward with the contract extension. It does not need to go to the full board for approval.
Right. Because
go ahead, Chair.
well, I think because the actual contract's been discussed and approved before they're adding an additional item to it that I don't believe materially changes the contract. It's just one additional license they need, because I guess they decided there's one additional tool they need to add to the suite of software. So
I understand that. It's a no for me though. It's a $10,000. Like it's a substantial amount that I would like to have a further discussion about. But if the majority says it's approved, it's approved. But for me, it's a no.
Okay. Now you want to have the board have a conversation about this? Or
yeah, I don't know if it's worth moving it to the board, but with the limited conversation we've had about it right now, without me being able to ask appropriate questions, is just a no for me.
Okay, I get what you're saying. All right. So Junior Chief Tim, we have approval. I think Chair Board Member Brody apparently would like to have some time for discussion. And so at this point, Chairman Rigueur, I will leave in your hand if this is something you want to add a little line item or time to discuss at the full board meeting. Otherwise, I think we have the numbers to approve it at this committee level.
Well, I appreciate that. What I would say is I don't think, given the dollar amount, that this needs to go to the board per se. But I do think Member Brody brings up a good point. If there needs to be more discussions, I would say it should probably happen within the finance committee. I do not, again, for $10,000, I don't think that requires board approval.
Okay. And I honor that too. I mean, because realistically, we would discuss it more. It's just in this case, we've actually run out of time at today's meeting, and I don't want to belabor the meeting here.
Well, Chief Penn, is there a, sorry to interrupt, is there a time constraint regarding this particular item?
There is, and I think Dr. Silver can address that.
Dr. Silver?
Thank you so much, Chairman Walker, and for this opportunity. This tool is specifically for tracking employee satisfaction, and is intended to, we're getting it in place so that we can survey our staff as we end the school year. Otherwise, we would not be able to collect this data in this way, and to get this system up and running so that we can work through the summer to also have employee satisfaction data that we're collecting, and starting the school year with employee satisfaction data. So this is a big part of our work to retain our workforce and our teachers, and to make sure that we're addressing their needs and their interests with regard to having a welcoming, strong environment for them to work in and to grow professionally.
And Dr. Silver, do we not have that capability currently?
This system here through Qualtrics, this $9,500 would help us close the year and put the system in place. We do not have it up and running right now.
So we do not. So currently, we do not have that capability to capture that feedback, teacher feedback.
The way that the office, the vision, in alignment with the vision for having ongoing data collection and support of teachers and staff. We don't have it right now, no.
Okay, at least for me, I think that's the piece that was missing. I'm perfectly fine with moving forward, but with default to the group.
Okay, thanks, Chairman Rigueur. So I guess I'll ask Dr. Silver, is there some detrimental impact if we defer this until the next meeting? I mean, with the project, would the project be detrimentally impacted if we wait another month to approve this?
I think that it will, in terms of getting it up and running this school year. We really, this is late to get the system in place. And so we have a whole building process, a build out process that needs to happen in advance of the close of the school year. So I am concerned that we may not be able to build it out in time.
Okay, so I guess Board Member Brody, I'm honoring what you're asking. I will say this, Dr. Silver. I want you to have the capability, because the thing that I'm hearing that you don't currently have is a way for people to give anonymous feedback. Is that what you're saying right now is the case?
We have means for collecting anonymous feedback, but the additional component that we're purchasing comes with a build out of staff survey data that we would be able to collect longitudinally and link to specific roles and specific settings, so that we can understand and respond to the needs of specific schools or specific roles. So we don't have that system in place right now.
Okay. Okay. What I'm gonna join in and say that I too would say I think the consensus was let's move forward with it, and and with the note from Board Member Brody, what I would like is to have this come back as a discussion at a future meeting, because what I really would like to understand, have voice in, is the district's response. Like, if you're going to collect this data, the one thing that I've not been really clear on is that the district has a really structured, very hard-hitting, here's how we address feedback from staff, from stakeholders. You know, here's what we do with it. We have a team. Do we, you know, there's something actually is going to be done with this data in a way that really honors the feedback that you're getting. If you understand what I'm saying, it would really be great to have some voice in that, because that to me is the real value add, that we really put together a real response program to honest staff feedback.
Thank you. And we do have coming up in our progress monitoring in our calendar, we will be bringing the full Qualtrics contract to the board by the end of the year, so that we can bring it into the new year, and we can certainly give a very comprehensive overview of the pieces of Qualtrics that we are moving forward with and how we will respond to the data that we're collecting.
Okay, so I think the decisions that we're going to approve this, the funding. Okay, so that'll be the action, that'll be in the final notes. So thank you, everyone, for hanging on. We've gone over. The reports will just be incorporated as part of the board docs. And so if you have comments and questions on the reports, then you can respond to myself or to the person who is the owner of that particular report. Am I accurate in what I'm saying there, Chief Penn?
Yes, or through Ms. Santiago, whatever's easier.
All right, Ms. Santiago, you can send it to her as well. Okay. Again, thank you. I think we're at the conclusion of this Finance and Audit Committee meeting for today, and thank you for your attendance, participation, and we will see you again next month and at the upcoming